Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. My name is Megan Billingsley. I'm a researcher at the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, and I will be the moderator today. At this time, I would like to ask everyone to place their phones on mute locally. That's that little mute button on your telephone. We have a relatively small group today, so we'd like to try to make this a bit more of a discussion, which means we're going to unmute everybody through the webinar. So to make this work, what we'd like to ask is if you have any clarifying questions you'd like to ask during the presentation, feel free to chime in when one of our speakers takes a breath. However, if we start to get a lot of background noise or this kind of just devolves into mass chaos,
the conference has been unmuted.
We're going to go ahead and just mute everyone and take questions via the chat box, which is on the lower left side of your screen. And for those of you who are shy, don't worry about it. We're also taking questions. Use the chat box, and I'm happy to ask your questions to our speakers. If you do have any questions that don't fall under this clarifying category, please save them for the end of the webinar so that we can make sure we have plenty of time to get through all of our material. And I should also mention that this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the LBNL website at emp.lbl.gov. It will probably be posted sometime in the next week or so. So we have two primary speakers today, Ian Hoffman with the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab and Nick Dahlberg with the Consortium for Energy Efficiency. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Ian.
Thanks, Megan. Today you're going to hear from these two teams with your presenters up at the top. I'm Ian Hoffman with the Electricity Markets and Policy Group. I'm the guy who's camouflaged by the cute 4-year-old up at the upper left. I led much of the development of the program Typology and Data Glossary that we're going to discuss today. And you've already met Megan. She's the leader of the Cost of Saved Energy project here at the laboratory. Her work focuses on the deployment of energy efficiency through public, nonprofit, and utility-administered programs. We also want to recognize the other members of our project team, led by Chuck Goldman, who is the principal investigator and head of energy and environmental analysis here at the laboratory. We'd also like to thank the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Electricity for funding this work. Joining us from the Consortium for Energy Efficiency, we have members of CEE's Evaluation, Research, and Behavior team. Nick Dahlberg will be presenting on behalf of the team. His work involves supporting the various research and information sharing projects of CEE's Evaluation Committee, as well as working on the CEE Annual Industry Survey and the Energy Star Household Awareness Survey that many of you are probably familiar with. You can see the rest of the respective teams here, including team leader Hillary Forster. We're briefly going to cover what we do and why we developed this common language and what the program Typology and Data Glossary are. How did we and CEE create these things, and then each team will describe kind of what was done with them so far. And lastly, we're going to talk about what other uses and benefits we see for applying these things for the industry at large. The energy efficiency technical assistance team here at Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory performs objective demand-side management policy and program analyses to understand what's going on in the world of energy efficiency. You can see a partial list of our research portfolio here. And one of our primary objectives is to share that information and help advise stakeholders in the energy sector. I'd like to ask Nick to talk about the CE Evaluation, Research, and Behavior team for just a second.
Sure, thanks, Ian. So the Evaluation, Research, and Behavior team at CEE is one of our cross-cutting sectors, if you will, of our program work. And so as you can see on the slide here, we leverage CEE's binational membership to address pressing policy issues, share information across the two countries, and identify opportunities for standardization where appropriate. Two of the big things we work on each year, as Ian already mentioned, are the Annual Industry Survey, which will be the topic of my slides later on, and the Energy Star Household Awareness Survey. We also work on behavior change programs, including with two-way feedback technologies, cost-effectiveness work now, and we host the CEE Forum Library of which is a repository for evaluations, industry and academic research, and other resources.
Thanks, Nick. So why did we create this topology of efficiency programs and a accompanying term of glossary of efficiency terms? Both of our organizations expend a lot of effort trying to understand this industry and where it's headed. LBL through several reports and modeling efforts, CE through its State of the Industry report and the work of its committees. And together we, and I would argue lots of other stakeholders, face a common challenge. And some kind of standardization, some consensus-based terminology and delineation of program types is really essential to doing a credible job of assessing and conveying an understanding of energy efficiency at any scale larger than the individual program administrator. And really, it's only with this standardization can you aggregate data across multiple program administrators and make any meaningful comparisons on an apples-to-apples basis. In essence, you need at least the rudiments of a common language. That is not where we are today. The U.S. model for energy efficiency programs is a highly distributed and disaggregated model, and its language, or rather languages, have evolved in different places under different conditions and drivers. There are, granted, there are linkages, there are consultants and implementers who have carried terms and programs from one territory to another, but in general, there is no one lingua franca, if you will, for efficiency. The Northwest and some of the Midwest, for example, does energy efficiency and conservation and calls it conservation. Much of the rest of the country does energy efficiency and conservation and calls it efficiency, or calls it separately efficiency and conservation. Some places consider demand-side management to include efficiency and DR only. Some consider it just to be DR, and some would include customer-sided renewables and CHP. And when we get into definitions of savings, I think is where we really see the differences. There is this plethora of terms out there: claimed, reported, actual, adjusted, evaluated, verified savings. And we've tried to resolve some of that ambiguity in this glossary. Likewise, we've tried to resolve ambiguity with respect to lifetime savings and life cycle savings. There's a subset of states out there that, or program administrators that use the term life cycle savings to refer to what I think most people would refer to as lifetime savings for the programs that are in that program year going forward. But then they also add all the savings carried over from projects and measures deployed in previous years. Net savings, is another area where we see an awful lot of ambiguity and differences from state to state. Is it just free ridership? Is it total free ridership, partial free ridership? Is it free ridership plus spillover? What kind of spillover? There's an interesting ACEEE report out on this that really kind of explores that diversity of definitions that I'd refer people to. And lastly, we find that states classify programs in different sectors. Low-income programs sometimes get reported in residential portfolios. Multifamily programs can be classified as C&I. These linguistic and semantic differences, they lend color and texture to the efficiency picture. And they can serve some regulatory functions, but we suggest that having these multiple languages is really a kind of market barrier. In our view, it stands as an obstacle to reliable quantification of the efficiency resource on a multi-administrator, multi-state basis, and it's an obstacle to being viewed as a reliable resource by planners and policymakers. And it's an obstacle in other ways. One example I give is access to secondary financial markets, something that's going to require aggregation of programs and portfolios into packages that are large enough to buy and sell. So the two essential components here, in order to do this standardization of efficiency terminology and data, the two essential components are a data glossary of terms and definitions, and the program topology, which contains a number of program categories and their definitions. If I could also just remind folks again to mute locally. And here's a sample of some of the key terms from our data glossary We have literally dozens of terms in that glossary. We took nearly all of them verbatim from a very helpful and quite thorough glossary published with the Sea Action Impact Evaluation Guide. That's the State and Local Energy Efficiency Action Network. You can find this guide in the EM&V Working Group publications. And the terms and definitions in that glossary were the result of a consensus process of pulling in stakeholders from several parts of the country, taking their suggestions and working through the differences. We checked those definitions against other sources, such as NEEP's very definitive glossary, as well as work by committees at CEE and work by ACEEE, to ensure that these terms were really precise and encompassing, and that they were reasonably widespread in usage. The second part of this language is, and for data standardization, is the program topology. You can call it a taxonomy. It's a set of more than 60 detailed program types, each defined by market sector and technology, design, and/or delivery approach. This is, to our knowledge, the first that is based upon an actual national inventory of programs that are in the field. And it was developed through an iterative process. We started with some program types that were identified by the Sea Action Network, and we added some that we knew were commonly used or of interest, such as financing or behavioral programs. And then, as we collected data around the country, we augmented that list with programs that were reasonably well represented nationally, or at least regionally. And for a couple of examples, there are a fair number of pool pump programs in the South and Southwest. You tend not to see elsewhere, but they're prevalent in those regions. We see a lot of agricultural irrigation programs in the Midwest. And we see data center efficiency programs, for example, in New York, in California, and Washington, but not necessarily in other places. They nonetheless can be quite significant in terms of spending or savings or both in those regions. And then we began a conversation with the Consortium for Energy Efficiency, which does its own data collection, and CE wanted to separate out the commercial and industrial programs. We did that, and so the list grew somewhat more. When we're actually deciding what goes into each of these categories, our touchstone really is the nature of the savings. In order to properly characterize a program requires some visibility into the designs of the program, the projects, and the program achievements. What is the program's approach to acquiring savings, and what is it actually getting? What types of end uses best characterize the savings acquired? And we used, in-house, we used a quality assurance, quality control process to ensure consistency across the multiple people who were entering data in our database. And I also want to say that this topology is dynamic. We envision that programs are going to change, and they're going to change in design, implementation. Their measure mixes are going to change, and their projects are going to change over time. And we also would like the topology to change as new program types emerge and as programs evolve. One example I think that we're looking at now is for residential behavioral programs. Our category includes all programs that provide feedback on energy usage directly to the household, and it typically includes home energy report or O-Power style programs, but also online audits and in-home displays. I think it's clear now that the behavioral programs are diversifying, and that aggregating them in this fashion may risk distorting the costs. And so it's hard to get a good, clean cost number with aggregation at that level, so it's something we're going to be looking at. So this is a representation of the program topology. This is not all of the program categories, but rather a sample kind of for illustrative purposes. As we mentioned, we now have 65 detailed program categories that are then consolidated into 30 simplified categories, and then further simplified, kind of going aggregated upward into 7 sectors. And what that means is that anyone who uses the topology has the ability to kind of bucket these programs up, to aggregate them in different ways. Since the only categorization that really is manually designated is the detailed program categorization, kind of there in that pale blue. All the others kind of flow from that. And so rebucketing these things, sorting them, is really just a question of defining new categories above that level. Just want to give a quick example diving into a specific sector. I know this is difficult to read, but I wanted you to have a sense of the level of detail here down at the detailed program level. And again, this level of detail is driven by the prevalence of the programs that we actually found in the field. There are additional industrial and agricultural programs, and those that are listed here, but we left them off kind of for space. But they include, in addition to these self-direct programs, there are, as many of you are aware, a lot of those around the country. There are financing programs. We have a category for that. And then we have a catch-all for anything that is not clearly identifiable and can be categorized within one of these program types. We needed to have some way of capturing all of the rest of those programs. And so that brings up kind of the next issue, and this is, we tried in defining these program types to define kind of bright line distinctions around them, but there are data limitations that did compel us to include some categories that are more general or generic. And why do we do that? We often encountered some very brief or vague program narratives out there, or the programs themselves were very loosely defined. One not uncommon example are programs that would purport to cover the entire non-residential space with unidentified prescriptive measures. We also worked hard to minimize the classification of programs in these categories, really diving into annual reports to see whether we could discern what they really were. And we also ran into some highly aggregated programs. There are a couple out there that are kind of labeled new homes and products. And they combine, both new construction and then a lot of rebates for single measures that are out there. They're pretty sweeping in scope, and so having this multi-level topology helps with being able to still keep them in our database, but not kind of smear the categories hopefully too much. And so what did we actually do with this, the program topology and the data glossary? 3 weeks ago, I think some of you were on a webinar that we did last week where we discussed this paper that we published 3 weeks ago on the program administrator cost of saved energy for utility customer funded energy efficiency programs. What we found was that the cost of saved energy had not really been comprehensively documented or analyzed down at the program level. And so we collected that information nationally. I think our collection, we have 1,700 individual programs nationwide, a total of, when you track them out over multiple years, we have more than 4,000 program years of data. And on the basis of that, we defined the cost of saved energy, the dollars per kilowatt hour, dollars per therm for reductions in energy use on a lifetime and a levelized basis. And our objective here was, we had multiple objectives, and some of them I mentioned earlier for the language itself, is to enable program administrators to design and implement more cost-effective efficiency portfolios, and to help kind of isolate some of the cost and performance metrics that we think are of use. What we have covered in this data set are, again, chiefly the programs that are funded by IOU customers, and there's a focus on program administrator cost. In this particular report, we're working on developing total resource cost for these programs, and we analyze at multiple levels, at the national level, state, regional and state levels, by market sector, and by program type. I wanted to provide an example here of how the topology can help dissect both the program spending and savings on multiple geographic levels. This shows us that in the residential sector, You can look for this time period covered by our database 2009 to 2011, and you can see kind of where the majority of savings is coming from and drill down into it and see how much comes from lighting and how much comes from these other program categories. The report itself goes into a lot of detail. I just wanted to throw this up as an example. Likewise, this shows you how when we can aggregate up there at up to the portfolio level, that we can drill into what the cost of savings is, and we find that it's actually we found that it's lower than previous studies have identified. I think as I work through these slides, I'm just going to hit them rather quickly. I just want to show kind of what you can do generally by being able to disaggregate things down to multiple levels. This is at what we consider the simplified program level, and you can see the diversity in cost across these different program categories. You can see the number of programs listed down there in red. Again, on the left axis, we have the levelized cost of saved energy in 2012 dollars. And likewise, you can see the same thing in the area of mostly single measure programs, these consumer rebate programs in the residential sector. And again, levelized cost on your left axis. What we also hope to be able to do is to kind of dive in and figure out what's driving the diversity in these costs. And one of the ways in which we expect to be able to do that is by doing some statistical testing on some factors that we theorize at least do have an influence over those costs. I think we, kind of on a larger level, we think that having a common language has value for a lot of stakeholders within and across states and nationally. These are just some examples. We think program administrators want to know what each other are doing, how they're doing it, and with what effect. By classifying programs, it now takes us less than a minute to tell you where similar programs might be found, and perhaps a few key things about them. We do already see resource and transmission planners using DSM data in an aggregated way to make load forecasts, and sometimes using program-level data to formulate resource portfolios for IRPs that have both demand and supply resources. Unfortunately, they run into an information asymmetry that can disadvantage energy efficiency on the supply side. Everyone has a notion of what a wind turbine or a nuclear power plant is, but they don't really know what a retrofit or a custom C&I program is. What are the performance characteristics of those programs? Having a common language begins to address this information asymmetry. And similarly, state regulators often want to be able to look easily across resource portfolios and make some comparisons among demand and supply options. A common language facilitates those comparisons, and as we mentioned earlier, we see some mounting interest in increasing financing for energy efficiency. Some people think that financing is a key to getting programs up to large scale, but really doing this means you need liquidity at the lender level and you need access to secondary markets. Programs today are just too small to be really worth the transaction cost to those markets, but at least one path forward is bundling, which means identifying programs and projects of similar characteristics, and a common language can help provide those markets with a tool for bundling and for risk management. So to sum up, we believe that there is a direct connection between the maturation of energy efficiency as a utility and national resource and standardization of data and consistency in the reporting of efficiency program costs. We think some additional rigor and completeness and standardization again, some consensus on the essential elements of program level reporting could increase confidence in energy efficiency among a plethora of policymakers and other stakeholders. And I invite anyone online to contact us after the fact with any questions or requests for resources. We're delighted to hear from you. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Nick.
So real quick before we dive into Nick's report or Nick's discussion, I did want to bring up two more things. You can find the entire data glossary and all of the programs in the program typology in a policy brief on our website. And that website is emp.lbl.gov. And then same for the slides for this report and then the main report on the cost of saved energy. All of that information can be found at emp.lbl.gov. The other option is just to get in touch with Ian or Nick or myself, and we can point you to the right resources. Nick, all yours.
Great, thanks so much. All right, so I'm going to talk to you now just about what we at CE have done over the past year to incorporate this program typology into one of our major research efforts, which is the annual industry report. And I apologize in advance for the density of text on some of the slides. I'll try to breeze through it as quickly as possible. And I do just want to mention again that whereas I'm giving the presentation today, I obviously need to give a shout out to Hillary Forster, our team lead, and to Pat Wallace, another program associate here, who have been just as involved with this process as I have. All right, so just the quick standard who we are slide. If you don't know much about CE, we are the U.S. and Canadian Consortium of Electric and Natural Gas DSM Program Administrators. So we are a member-based organization. You can see a map there in the upper right of states and provinces in which we have members. Our members are various types of organizations, most of which are program administrators, but not all of which. And we work with our members through over 20 sector and end-use specific committees to advance specific initiatives for efficient product types in various categories. We also have cross-sector support for evaluation, behavior-based programs, natural gas programs, new program design, and connectivity. So that's a brief overview, and you can obviously check out our website. It's at the top of this slide here. All right. So again, our team is the Evaluation, Research, and Behavior team, and we've talked already about what we do. But one of our major projects is the State of the Efficiency Program Industry Report. So this is a survey that's sent out to program administrators, both CE members and non-CE members in the US and Canada over the summer and fall for the past, I think, eight years now, and obviously culminates in a report. The latest one just came out a couple weeks ago. It's the 2013 State of the Efficiency Program Industry. You can see a link there midway down the slide. And these reports all provide information on electric and gas DSM program activity in both countries. It tends to be current year as of the survey, budgets, and previous year expenditures and savings. And I should also mention that we collaborate very closely with the American Gas Association and the Edison Foundation Institute for Electric Innovation to broaden the panel when possible and to actually collect some of the information from program administrators. And both of those organizations produce separate reports, which you can find on their websites. So from our perspective, the main purpose of this project is to provide an annual snapshot analysis of the demand-side management industry. But also increasingly over the past couple of years, we've wanted to make sure that this information can be plugged into CE committee work, not least because many of the respondents are CE members. So that has identified a need on our end, not only for sector or customer class level information, but also program level information. So what did we actually do in 2013? So in January or so of last year when we decided, okay, we're going to collect some program information, the next obvious question was, all right, how are we going to actually develop program categories that will be useful in both countries, comparable, credible, and consistent? And obviously, as you heard Ian speak to before, we found that Berkeley Lab had already developed a very comprehensive set through their cost of saved energy research. So we worked with Ian and Megan in the spring of 2013 to adapt these to the CE survey to fit our needs. There were a few updates, as Ian also mentioned, that CE suggested based on our understanding of members' programs, but it's safe to say that they were that the original set of program categories and the final set, which has been released in the policy brief that Ian mentioned were more than sufficiently descriptive for our needs, and we were happy to kind of pilot them in our 2013 survey. The way we kind of asked the questions, I should say, it's an online survey, and we decided to incorporate the typology this year by asking respondents to provide us, their portfolio level information, budgets, expenditures, savings, and then if they could, to break that down on the program level. So we would ask, list all your programs. Then they would self-report the customer class of those programs, and then as you can see in this snapshot here, which is from the survey itself, they would self-report the detailed program category for each of these programs just through a drop-down. So it's very simple. And then we also obviously provided a PDF copy along with the survey of all of the program categories and the definitions for use. Those who couldn't provide the program level information were asked to just do what we've asked in the past, give percentages to break everything down on the sector or customer class level. And I should mention, I'll come back to this later, that there was a slight lag obviously between when we fielded our survey last summer and when the policy brief came out in November. So there are slight differences, in very, very minimal differences in the program typology that you'll see in the appendices of our report. But that's something that we're going to be working to update for this next iteration. So what are the results? Here's the fun stuff. 58% of respondents provided program level data using the energy efficiency categories. And you can see that I have the numbers here, or the percentages here too. Out of the energy efficiency program information, 42% of the budgets and expenditures were program level data provided by the respondents, and 53% of the gross incremental energy savings. So the big picture here is that we got a fantastic response, in our opinion. It was a great first run, and we're excited to keep moving forward with this. Also, I should mention, we didn't get any questions on the program typology. So since we did get so many people using the programs and self-reporting, and I doubt everyone was sitting there and shaking their heads taking the survey, we take this to mean that the categories were meaningful to program administrators. This is just a slide to give you an idea of the granularity of the data that we were able to collect this year. This is actually a figure from the appendix of one of the appendices of our report. The purpose is just to say, when we finally put this list together, it was kind of like, wow, look at this. We have all of these program types. We have all of these, hard data, hard numbers. And this has actually already helped CE staff fact check and identify programs to discuss with our members. Again, you can find this in the report, and I should mention, these particular numbers are not the full picture. It's about 42% of all the data that we got, but it's a great first start. So the real test, though, was how did these program level data stack up to everything that we got? You can see here I put the 2012 expenditures and 2012 gross incremental energy savings. On the left we have the program level data only, and on the right we have all of the data we collected. So that includes people who weren't able to give us program level information. And you can see that the breakdowns are nearly identical. So this, again, at least suggests that the response was large enough to the survey, and the use of the program categories was wide enough to be representative on the customer class level. The next question, of course, is, okay, so what about within the customer classes? What is the breakdown of different programs? And that's a more nuanced question, as I'm sure is obvious, and that will be answered over the next couple iterations. But like I said, it's already provided at least CE staff with some good insights for committee work. So that's great for our interests, at least at CE. So then finally, what's next? One thing that I will mention is we noticed a trend in some cases away from more descriptive breakdowns. So people might select other, or they might select custom or prescriptive as opposed to one of the more specific program types like custom agriculture or custom data centers. And we've already identified some kind of blunt force methods that we can use in the survey to cut down on that next year. But we're also going to be making a few updates. As I mentioned, the typology that is in the policy brief is more updated. So we're going to make sure that in 2014 our categories again align with that, and that we will also incorporate CE member input to make sure that at least within the survey, the categories that are used match the needs of CE and match the expectations of the respondents. The goal, or let me take a step back. We also hope, over the next couple of years, as we make changes to the online survey and make it easier, and particularly make it easier to select program types, that we're going to get more responses and we'll get even more people giving us the program level information. So the goal overall is to keep checking back. We're going to ensure that any changes that occur in our survey will align right back with the final typology that's been developed, and then if and when that changes over time, that we are aligning what we have with that so that we can ensure seamless integration and comparability. Because again, we've seen that these programs, at least in this survey process, have been useful and understandable from the perspective of respondents. And that is the end of my slide deck. This is just our contact information right here for all three of us on the team who've been working on this project. And also I just have the link down there for data requests regarding regarding the survey, or well, regarding the report. And I will hand it back over.
Great, thanks, Nick. So we have not had any questions come in via chat, so I'd like to open it up to folks on the line. Are there any burning questions you would like to chime in and ask? Crickets.
Yeah, this is Jeremy Twitchell. I'm a regulatory analyst with the Washington State Utilities and Transportation Commission. One of the problems, or maybe disconnects we've noticed, is that a lot, not your report, but some of these other reports that have been done by other entities looking at nationwide energy efficiency programs omit Washington despite the robust and well-established programs that we have. And kind of talking with people and looking at it, we think one of the problems is kind of what you're talking about, this disconnect in terms of definition. We define it as conservation, not energy efficiency, which I think is a big problem. So my question is, as analysts, where are you usually going to find this information? Are you going to the state, to utility commissions first? Are you going directly to utilities? Where should we be directing our efforts in terms of incorporating some of these definitions and glossary terms you've defined?
Do you mind if I take that first, Megan? This is Ian. Where we go for that information is we go into the dockets. That's part of what makes some of our reports very labor intensive.
Right.
But we really do want to drill down into what people are actually reporting. We don't have any better primary data sources out there. Or actually, I guess these are secondary data sources. And so we're very reliant upon what's in the public domain in the regulatory sphere. We do think that there is a big role here for regulators in sketching out some expectations and suggesting that there is maybe some value for the program administrators within their purview to adopt some of these rubrics, to look at standardizing on these data definitions and maybe just devoting a field in their placemats or their tables to sorting out what kind of program it is, and I think that would help for us, for CEE, and for this much larger universe of stakeholders out there, including yourselves. So. Did that get to your question, or do you have a follow-up?
No, I appreciate that. The reason I ask is we have a rulemaking process open actually right now for our energy efficiency rules, and I was wondering if it was something that we should incorporate into the rules, or if it was something we should be more specific in terms of what we ask the utilities to report. So thank you.
Yeah, I think our general answer is yes. We would love that. Have Deborah give us a call, or you give us a call, and we can hash through it if you like.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we've had another question come in. What kind of traction has the typology gotten from PUCs? And there's kind of a specific question about whether the CPUC has any plans to utilize common definitions.
I think it's fair to say that we have not exactly seen a wellspring of interest in the regulatory community as yet, but we're we really just kind of rolled this out, and we haven't really done much in the way of engaging folks prior to this webinar.